Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Yeah, wow. Purim, it's so interesting. It's such an interesting holiday. Dave mentioned how things are topsy-turvy at Purim. And the question is, why would a Jewish holiday be like that? I mean, why topsy-turvy? In very religious circles, you could even get drunk that day. You can even cross-dress. I mean, that's really weird, but, it wasn't an endorsement of the practice. It was just that it was one day for going crazy. That's what it was. But the question is, why? And an answer that I learned when I was studying at Spertus College in Chicago was that it's like games. You see, the purpose of a game, playing is very important. Did you know that playing was important? Extremely important. Playing games, very important. Sue and I love games. We have game times here at Ruach sometimes. But the purpose of a game is to solve a problem. It's to help you work through something that you might not be even consciously aware, and it's maybe not related to the game particularly. But the games of Purim, the game of all the reversal, is to solve a big problem. And I'll tell you what it was and is. It's the problem of how do you, as a Jew, live in the diaspora. In Israel, okay, it all makes sense. All the holidays are laid out. The rhythm of life is according to Torah. But here in Susa, and in the days of Esther and Mordecai, they're living in Galut, in the diaspora. And the purpose of all the craziness as the holiday developed in Jewish thinking was to solve this problem. How do you do it? Because all the problems they encounter, and I'm not going to get into all of them, have something to do with being in Galut, being powerless, having enemies, capricious kings, etc., etc. So that, I just wanted you to know that. But there's another interesting dimension of Purim that I want to tell you. And I think Dave may have mentioned this too. It's the only book in the scripture where God isn't explicitly mentioned at all. Isn't that weird? Isn't that odd? In fact, that may have been why there was some question as to whether the book should even be in the canon of Scripture, and thank God it was. And I'll say this parenthetically, that it was thought up until recently that, the Dead Sea Scrolls and in Qumran and that community, there was in all the literature that they produced, up until very recently, there was no book of Esther. And that seemed to give the impression that maybe even back in the first century, Esther was not quite so appreciated. Well, here's the good news. Through very sophisticated scientific techniques, they've been able to decipher a scroll, a very fragile scroll, and guess what it was? It was Megillat Esther. They found Esther. And let me tell you one of the cool things, what they found. In the same clay jar, they found baked goods and candy, fossilized, looked like a rock, but through the advanced techniques, it was baked goods and candy at the bottom of the same, where the Megillah was found. And the suggestion is that the Jewish custom of shloach manot baskets, that is giving food gifts, was actually something practiced way back there in Qumran a long time ago. So all of that is interesting, cool, and yet I want to tell you something else related to the fact that God is not mentioned. Because we would be mistaken to assume that God isn't present in the story just because he isn't explicitly mentioned. You can't read, the Tetragrammaton. You can't, we say Adonai. You can't read it. You can't find it. But he's there. And here is the concept I would like to introduce to you this morning as a real encouragement to all of us. God shows up in the world by his miracles, by his Torah, but here's an important concept. He shows up by his providence. Providence. There's a city not far from here, Providence. I don't mean that particular providence, but I think that people who, in the colonial period, when they named the city, they were aware of a concept that we can forget about easily, but it's so important, so central to our lives as Messianic Jews, and so loaded with encouragement during the topsy-turvy period that we're living on in history right now, that I had to talk with you a little bit about how God shows up in his providence. And what is going on here? Pardon me. Okay, we're good. Okay, so his providence. What is providence? Providence, most simply understood, is just his ability, God's ability, to orchestrate circumstances in a way that fit a pattern and which accomplish things out of love for people and accomplish his purposes more generally in the world. You've experienced it. Have you ever had a situation where you just run into the right person at the right time and you look back and, wow, how did that happen? It seems so unlikely. Anyone have that experience here? A lot of us have. Yeah, I have too. So I want to show you over the next few minutes how this works itself out in the life of Esther, Mordecai, you-know-who, and King Ahasuerus. Okay? So, you know the story. And Monday night, we'll go through it in some detail. But the king has a banquet. He has a wife. She doesn't want to come to the banquet. He gets mad because he's shamed in front of his peers. And he says, I'm going to get rid of Vashti. She's not going to be king anymore. And he puts out the word through his whole big empire, I'm looking for a new queen. Okay? I decided to show the unlikelihood of Esther being chosen. Through a Freedom of Information Act, through a Freedom of Information request that I filed, I came across this letter written by an official in Shushan to King Ahasuerus. And so I want to read this to you. Dear Royal Highness, may you live forever. I know that you are looking for just the right woman to replace disappointing Vashti. I would like to make a strong recommendation. My sister's daughter, Sassafrasia, is beautiful, loyal, was at the top of her class at law school at SU, University of Shushan. She is an Olympic-level swimmer, has won a recording contract after her performance at the show Persia Preens. She loves animals. She is a Persian princess par excellence. Do consider her, Your Majesty, your humble servant, who, as you know, won single-handedly a famous battle with the Egyptians at Carchemish, which may have saved your throne. Andratha the Loyal. Now, why do I come up with such a silly thing as this? Because it's silly time. We're playing games. It's Purim time. Not today, but you know what I mean. But it does point out something. And that is, do you realize, have you ever thought about how unlikely it was that Esther was chosen? A girl from a family, an nondescript family of Jews who came after the conquest by the Babylonians, her family, no one of any stature or anything. And yet, despite, and I would imagine that there were pressures like this on the king, you know, where there were courtiers who would love to have had their daughters or sisters or nieces become king. I'm sure it wasn't the easiest choice, but we know what happened. This is a function of God's providence. She came in. It was her gifting also. I don't want to just make it apart from her abilities, her wonderful gifts. But nonetheless, there's a providential dimension here. This is God's working behind the scenes to orchestrate circumstances which at the time Esther had no idea what was really going on. It's his providence. Now, let me give you another example from the book, and we'll just have a couple of them in the interest of time. The plot against the king and its aftermath. Now, Mordecai was raised to prominence for reasons he didn't know, but it was God's providence, God orchestrating circumstances. And here's what happened. Mordecai just happened to be sitting at the gates of the palace, eating a falafel. I don't know if that's in the text, but anyway, he was there, and he happened to overhear a couple of guys whispering to each other. They happened to be well-dressed. They turned out to be servants of the king, and they were plotting the assassination of the king. Did Mordecai intend to be at that spot at that time where he could hear this? No. It wasn't his doing. Where his own willingness to do the right thing kicked in, it wasn't just a matter of these orchestrated circumstances, is that he goes to tell on these two guys, the plot is found out to be true, they're dealt with. And of course, this leads to his becoming a prominent person. But it happened providentially. It happened because of circumstances that just conspired together. God was behind it, though, again, as we pointed out, his name, he isn't explicitly mentioned in the text at all. Now, here's how this continues. Haman, you know who, right? We'll do it right on Monday night. He is made a big shot in the kingdom. And he's strutting around town, and he loved it when people would bow before him. And and Mordecai wouldn't do it. And so the no-goodnik that we're talking about here was determined to not only get back at Mordecai, but again, and this gets back to the problem of being in the galut, right? That we're talking about the meaning of the game dimension here. That Mordecai is not the only object of the bad guy's hatred, but he decides on collective guilt, and he conjures up a plan to wipe out all the Jews in the kingdom. Well, again, on Monday we'll hear more about that. But something strange happens. One night, the king couldn't sleep. You ever have a night like that? Yeah. You hate it, right? Yeah. Ugh. He couldn't sleep. So he rang the royal bell, and the royal courtiers came and said, "Yes, Your Highness, what would you like? Would you like hot chocolate? What would you like?" He says, "You know what, I'll tell you what, I haven't read the annals of my kingdom lately. Why don't you get out the scrolls with the annals, read to me, because reading often will put me to sleep." So they get out the annals, and the king hears about this amazing providential thing that occurred, that Mordecai had done this incredible favor for him by warning maybe not him personally, but the people in his entourage, about the danger that was afoot, the assassination plot. So the king hears about this, and again, providentially, the bad guy, who thinks he can come in anytime he wants because he's been exalted to this lofty position, he comes in and encounters the king, maybe at 2 a.m, and when the bad guy entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now, the bad guy thought to himself, well, who is there the king would rather honor than moi, right? So he answered the king, "For the man who the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to the one, the king's most valuable princes, and let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, pronouncing before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Are you there? Right? Okay. "Great idea," the bad guy says. "Who is it?" What's his name again? Mordecai the Jew. Ah, incredible irony, right? Ironic, but in God's providence, a portent of what's going to happen as the story continues. Now, we don't have time really to go through many more of the examples, but I do want to bring this into the current moment with a story that our President Emeritus Diane Cohen shared with me a long time ago, and we reviewed it again, and it is an amazing story which includes the dimension of God's providence and how he looks after his kids. And if we have the eyes to see it, we will be greatly, greatly blessed. Take it away, and Diane.
Hi, Rabbi Rich asked me to talk to you about how we know and how we experience God in our lives. And I know that if you read my Shabbat encouragements that I've given you lots of examples of it, and I am a firm believer that the more we open ourselves to receiving God's presence in our lives, the more he manifests himself. He shows up. He's there. He's there all the time. It's just for us to see him. So it's hard to pick a story, but I want to talk to you about a little trip Sid and I took to Cadillac Mountain a number of years ago. It's a tall mountain on the East Coast. It's probably one of the tallest on the Eastern Seaboard. And we got there on a Sunday around 3, and we saw these shuttle buses, so we thought, well, let's do it. And we actually made it to the top by 5. And that's pretty good. But the assumption we made that was wrong is that the shuttle doesn't go to the top of the mountain. So it was 5 o'clock on a Sunday, and even though it was summer, got a few hours of sunlight left, there was no way to get down other than hike down. So we went into the gift shop. We thought we were talking to a ranger or someone that kind of knew, but I think the person we were asking, how do we get down from here, was probably the gift shop attendant. But she basically said that there's no normal trail, none of the normal trails that go down. We wouldn't have time to do those. They switch back a lot, and we'd have to take some other trail that's than the typical descending trail. So she said the only one that I think could get you down by dark would be the Bubble Pond Trail. So I said, okay, well, what's our choice? So we got ourselves a little flashlight, and she gave us extra batteries, and we set out. But it was getting darker, and it was starting to sprinkle, and I'm not an athlete. I'm a dancer, but Sid's my athlete. So he took the lead and started out, and the first thing we encountered were cascading rocks, like big hunks of jagged rock that we thought were leading to the trail. There was a sign that said Bubble Pond Trail, and we thought it was down there, so we thought we had to go through these rocks. So hiking down, and I'm very slow. We get partway down, and the more we get down, the less we see any evidence that this could possibly be a trail. So we turned around and said, okay, well, let's go back up. Yeah, it just looked like this giant wall of rocks. Where did we come from? Which direction? So, I said, well, maybe this way, maybe that way. And I didn't realize at the time, but that really was God leading us, even then, before we got in deeper. And as we got toward the top, Sid reached up, and he said that last rock that he grabbed, he said, it looked to me like the hand of God. It just looked like the hand of God. But got up there, went the other direction, found the trail marker, the blue trail marker. But what this trail looked like and was and is, it's not like grass and dirt and trees. It was sheetrock. It was just slabs of slanted rock. I don't know what kind of rock. Slippery rock. It was raining. I had on these parachute pants. It was super slippery rock. And the only way even Sid could get across it, and of course me, was to put our hands behind our backs like little crabs, walking like a crab walk across these rocks. And Sid would go, in front of me, and I was kind of scared. I put my left foot against his right foot, and when, we're scooting along with our little crab walk, and I had these parachute pants are like, there's like silk, they're like so slippery. And when we would look straight ahead, we would see this, descending rock with a ledge, and you could see treetops because we were in a mountain, so we knew we were up really high, and we knew if we slid down that rock, it wasn't good, right? So this, we're switchbacking a little bit with these rocks, but not a lot. And then, we get to this one rock where it's like 50 feet across. It's way too much. I knew I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So Sid said, honey, you can do it, watch. And so he said, if I can do it, you can do it, you know. So he goes across very slowly because it's like steeper. It's like probably a 30-degree angle. And it's raining, and it's thundering, and it's slippery. So he went across, and I said, I just can't do it. And I took my hand, he said, you got to. And I took my hand, I just put it on the rock like that, and I lifted my hand, and there was a root growing out through that rock underneath my hand, and when I looked, it extended the length of the rock. So I took that root, my other hand like a crab, and I'm pulling myself, and I made it across that rock in the rain and petrified. And we kept doing this for a while. At first I thought it was kind of fun, and then I was kind of hysterically laughing, and probably incongruent laugh. Then I was silent. I was just silent. I just said, God, whatever. I give up. I was just going through the motions, but my heart and I was just gone. I just was no longer emotionally participating. I felt numb. And then we get to this place where we don't see rocks. It's just nothing. It's like trees and ground. No sign of where to go. We're just looking like this. And then in the distance, I saw what looked to me like two people coming to rescue us. Two people, they were wearing white clothes. They had little flashlights, little lights. I said, Sid, look, that lady must have told them that we went down this crazy Fakakta trail. They're coming for us. So I went running toward these rescuers, and Sid went running toward me thinking I'm hallucinating. And I just ran, and luckily I could run there. We could run because we kind of reached the end of the rocks, but we didn't know, we were lost in the woods. And it's thundering, and it's lightning, and it's raining. And when I would run toward them, the closer I would get, the more it felt like they were backing up. It didn't feel like they were backing up, and I couldn't ever catch up with them. And then at some point, I didn't see them at all. But we got to this place. It turned out to be the bottom, right at the bubble pond area. And Sid said to me, Diane, we are lost because I know the map of this area, and the bubble pond is not near the trailhead. So we're still really lost. But what's great and amazing is that he was my rock, literally, during this hard part. God gave him the strength to lead us through all that we had just been through. And then God gave me the strength to go, yes, but look, Sid, look, this is where we go. And I don't know anything about that area, but God led us out of the area. Sid and I ran through these crazy fields. We went over a bridge. We went through, it looked like a little catwalk, through fields winding in different directions. I said, no, it's this way. It's this way. And we ended up in the parking lot of the trailhead 5 minutes before the last bus to town was taking hikers from the trailhead back to downtown Bar Harbor, around 8 o'clock, 8:15 that night. So I know I sure didn't know what I was doing, and this is God. I mean, it is so clear that this was God in our lives. And it doesn't have to be a miraculous thing on Cadillac Mountain. These things happen. The more we know it and recognize it and are willing to receive it, God's just pouring it out, waiting for us. So, Shabbat Shalom.
Now, there's a lot of dimensions to it. In fact, there's even the intimation, who are these two people in white that they saw? That's another whole story. But what you have here is evidence of God's providence. She reaches her hand down, and there's a root to hold on to. The whole thing just oozes what we're talking about today, of God's wonderful way of orchestrating circumstances that doesn't leave us without responsibility to be courageous and do good things. It's not that way, but nonetheless, it's real. And so what I want to leave you with as we begin to move into the season of Purim, or the holiday of Purim, as we continue to navigate life at a period of American history and world history that's replete with, filled with confusion, I just want to encourage you all. God is real. His providence is real. But here's the thing. You only see what you believe you can see. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Believe it. If you are looking for God's orchestrating circumstances in a way that solve problems for you, and you're walking with him in spirit and truth and being a sacrificial giving person and all the things he wants, count on him. His providence is real. Shabbat shalom, everyone.